I've been really excited to get involved in this group. So today I'm going to be talking about stuff that is not from the Farm Hub, but it's sort of a to be continued because I'm very excited we're going to be starting a 2-year project this summer at the Farm Hub with grassland birds, and there'll be quite a lot of translation from what's going on here. But it's not too far away. What I will be talking about is all of this project is in Vermont, so a close cousin to you here. And really, what I study is birds, but the birds that I study are linked to their landscape, and their landscape is completely defined by cows. And so cows are, in many respects, the center point of this discussion in Vermont. But what's really kind of cool about this is that even though this picture is showing you cows, it's actually showing you right now bobolinks as well. You just can't see them because they're on the ground, in the grass, hidden. And there's actually a nest right where the N is for my name. There's a nest right in that area. So the news for grassland birds is unfortunately pretty bad. They've declined precipitously across their entire distribution. This is a project that I did looking at their populations of the 6 most abundant species in the Northeast, so the New England states and New York, showing their population declines over about a 40-year period. And the trend is pretty obvious, right? And what's the cause of this? And the cause is 2 things. First, it's habitat loss, of course, where hayfields are either reforested, which is a great thing for our forests, and so that's not something I focus on at all, or they're turned into housing developments or whatnot. But the part that I really focus on are the ones that the habitats are still being managed. And these habitats look a lot like this. This is the landscape that I work in, which is a really great contrast for the work that we'll be doing at the Farm Hub, because here there's a lot of opportunity for grassland birds. They can go to their neighbors' fields in lots of places. There's 360,000 acres of managed grassland in the Champlain Valley. The Farm Hub is a very isolated place, and that's really the spirit of the work we'll be doing, kind of trying to understand the relationship between movements between birds in places like this and birds' movements in a place like the Farm Hub. So this is the landscape, and in this landscape, it's really defined by this process here, which is Hayfield Management. And Hayfield Management is really a remarkably efficient process where in a day's time, you take a field that has waist-deep plants and insects and mammals and amphibians and birds nesting, and you can remove that within hours for forage feed for cows. And the timing of harvest has really changed since the 1960s, where in Vermont, if you're mowing by Memorial Day, you're almost on the late side. So farmers have really moved up their hay harvests from 4th of July, which was in the 1960s, sort of the aim date, till now into late May, in some cases mid-May. We've had farmers mowing as early as May 14th. And this process is really tough on birds. The mowing process really destroys any active nests. So there's really a 100% nest failure during mowing time. About 80% are actually destroyed by the mowing itself, and about 20% survive and are then eaten by predators that come into the fields, okay? So that's a really awful story, but the great story is that the birds respond to it, and that's really where my work goes to. But linked in that is thinking about, well, how much of the habitat is actually mowed intensively during the breeding season? And in the Champlain Valley, depending on the weather, up to 50% of the total grassland habitat is cut by early June. And so that's really showing that population processes are absolutely pushed by the timing of mowing in this region. So how can we balance this, right? And that's really what my work tried to do. And the thing that I'm not trying to do is say, farmers, take your fields out of production, okay? Or do this, which is going to cost you money. The goal for me has always been to find a model that allows the farmer to meet their current objective while also creating habitat for birds to breed in their fields and pastures, okay? And so I came up with perhaps a totally awful idea where I actually started asking farmers to mow earlier than they actually wanted to mow. So if they were going to mow June 1st, I'd say, please mow May 20th. Or if they're going to mow June 10th, move up to May 25th. And then once you mow early, delay your second harvest for 65 days. And what that 65-day window does is it gives enough time for the birds to both recolonize the field, because some species will abandon the field for a while, and then complete their nesting cycle. And completing their nesting cycle is important in that it's not only when the little chunky chicks actually leave the nest, because they walk out of the nest. They're little balls of protein. They can't fly at all. They need at least 2 weeks to be able to have any mobility, right? And so it's more than just actually leaving the nest. It's a fairly complicated process. And what's been really cool is Vermont NRCS has funded this project, and they pay farmers now 3-year contracts to mow this way. Ben & Jerry's is also funding their farmers in Vermont. 50% of the milk that's produced in the state of Vermont is sold to Ben & Jerry's. And it's been really fantastic. So I did a lot of work trying to understand if this project really benefited birds, as it does. And these are the data, and this is really simple. On the y-axis is the total number of offspring that a female can produce in a given year, okay? So 6 means that she fledged 6, the average female on a field fledged 6 young in a year. The yellow bars are for bobolinks and savanna sparrows, and those are females breeding on the fields that are involved in this program, where they're mowing early and then they're delaying 65 days. The blue bars are fields that are not cut at all during the breeding season. And then the red bar are the traditionally mowed early cut fields, where they cut early, and then instead of delaying 65 days, they cut after 35 or 40 days. And you can see reproductive success on the fields involved in this program is almost the same as if the field had never been harvested at all. And so there we have this model where farmers can mow early, they can feed their dairy cows the high-protein forage that they need, and they can farm bobolinks and savanna sparrows at the exact same time. It's a total win-win model. The trick of this, though, is finding the opportunity to talk to people. And the rest of what I'm going to show you today is I'm done with data slides. I'm going to show you maps and movements. Actually, I've got, two more data slides to show you that leads maps. And part of the issue that I've found is now that we know that this science works, it's about how do I communicate with farmers? How do I talk to them about this and help them create models that work for them as individuals? And I have found that the way to do that is not by talking about birds, but by talking about them and their human condition and the way that they were raised. And I'm going to show you stories about how birds move and think about this in your own life. So the first is thinking about if you have an adult bird on a given field, what's the probability that it's going to come back to your field no matter what happens to it? And the answer is that it's basically a 90% chance that if that bird survives, it's going to come back and it's definitely going to breed in your field no matter what happened to it. And this figure showed this. So on the x-axis is distance from where the bird previously was. And so essentially around every 600 meters is one field. Okay, so if you go from 0 to 600, you can see that it's almost 100% of the birds return to where they bred previously. All right? So what's really fascinating about this study system, and I look forward to knowing if this is also true here in New York, is that a huge number of birds that we banned as chicks for both savanna sparrows and bobolinks come back and breed exactly where they were hatched the previous year or two. And here is a figure that shows, that's not it, that's the same figure. Here it is. This is a figure that shows just that. And I've actually binned them correct on this one. And you can see that of all the birds that we find, about 30% of bobolinks and about 45% of savanna sparrows come back to the exact field that they were hatched in, and about 75% of both species come back to within one field of where they were hatched in. All right? So these birds are coming back. And why that's important is for you to know that if you're creating good habitat for these birds, that means you're also creating good habitat for their chicks. All right? And this is something that you can think about for yourself, right? You know what was good habitat for you as a child. And if you have chosen to have kids in the past or you choose to have kids in the future, you have an idea of what's good habitat that you want to create for your children, right? It's the exact same thing. And these are the kind of discussions that I have with these farmers. But it's best to be able to look at a bird, point at a bird, and say, that bird was born right there. And here's a great example of this. This is a bird that has was affectionately known as metal white, 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 because she had one metal band and 3 white bands on her legs. And she nested on this field in 2002, 4, 5, and 6. And in 2000, over those years, she fledged 19 offspring. And of those 19 offspring, we refound 7 of those chicks, okay? This figure shows you where those chicks went. So 3 of them came back and bred on the exact same field that she was hatched in, and then the other ones kind of dispersed to these other fields, right? Everybody got kind of an idea of this landscape? These are her grandchildren. Her grandchildren sort of moved around the local landscape. They were all within 1 or 2 fields. One of them went back to where her grandmother was breeding and was still there, in fact, at the same time. These are her great-grandchildren. Notice some of them are 1 field over. Others went back to the same field that she was breeding on. And then finally, she even had great-great-grandchildren coming back and breeding on the exact same field that she bred on. So these lines and generations are sticking local, and these are interesting things for us to think about and stories that we can tell about these individual birds. So with this information, in 2013, I decided I wanted to spread out my search for looking for these birds that we banned as chicks. And we started searching a 10-kilometer radius around our study fields. We searched in all the grassland habitat to look for these birds that are tiny birds wearing even tinier metal band on their leg. And it's a lot of work to do that. And we enlisted volunteers at the local Audubon group, and they would come out twice a summer. And ever since then, we've been searching for these birds that we find. And I want to show you some of the images, some of the maps of where we find these birds that are banded as chicks. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 maps that look just like this. On the left-hand side are savanna sparrows that we banded as chicks. On the right-hand side are bobolinks that we banded as chicks. The blue dot is the red dot is where the bird was hatched. The blue dot is where the bird was found. And a light blue dot means the bird returned to the same place that it was found at. Okay? Everybody got it? Now, I'm going to go through these 3 slides fairly quick, because what you're going to see is that there's sort of the same pattern. All right? Does everybody see this here? It's virtually the same pattern. I'll go back through them again. I'll come back to them. And you can basically see that the birds are staying in the same reasonable area, right? And it's the same for both species. So this pattern that we're seeing of dispersal is not changing over time. The birds are not moving very far, and this is what they do. It's in their genes and in their culture. So 2 years ago, I took that information and I got a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because people were talking about, well, maybe the birds are just dispersing farther and you're missing them. I said, okay, let's look. So we started looking, and we got a grant to look up to 24 kilometers away. And this, what you're seeing here, this map, in the blue fields are our study fields where we go out and catch all the birds and band all the chicks. And the red fields are the ones that we have searched. And there's other patches that you see here, but most of those patches, this is just the GIS layer, most of those patches are not suitable habitat for them. Okay, we're really searching the vast majority of suitable habitat within 24 kilometers. And I'm going to show you, and this is, we searched about 9,000 acres of hayfield, twice a summer for 2 summers. I'm going to show you the results from just last year, okay? In 2018, we recaptured 49 of these birds. It was unbelievable. High fives were given everywhere. 29 bobolinks and 20 savanna sparrows. And this map shows you where those birds were found, okay? And the trend is clear, right? It's exactly like I showed you from when we were searching 10 kilometers. The birds are not dispersing very far. We searched 24 kilometers distance, and we basically found nothing outside of 3 kilometers. So it's either 3,000 meters, or they're dispersing at a huge distance, probably hundreds of kilometers away, or I don't know, but more than 24, okay? So we found these cool results, and I wanted to tell you a story of one of the nests that we found during that time period. This is a nest of a bobolink that we banded, where you can see in the middle, the male was first banded in 2016, the female was banded in 2017. In 2016, the male had successfully fledged 2 offspring. 2017, the female had 5 offspring. And in that nest, in 2017, that was the nest that they fledged 5. In 2018, we found all 5 of those offspring. Now that is insane, because that means that all 5 of their offspring flew to Argentina and flew back, and we found all of them. They survived that crazy migration, all 5 of them, and they came back, and we were able to follow them. So right now, we're now following all of these lineages, because a lot of these birds are still breeding. This is 2018 data. They're still breeding in 2019. And so we're able to sort of look at these next generations of movements. So the next part I want to tell you about is large-scale movements. And for that, we're putting just amazing technology on these birds, and they wear them like little backpacks. And these are 2 of the things. One's called a geolocator, and one's called a pinpoint. And in effect, they tell us where the birds go when they're gone. All right? There's more details to that, but I'll leave the spice where it is. Here they are left on bobolinks and right on savanna sparrows. They're little backpacks. They don't like them, but they tolerate them. And here's where they go. This is a map just for bobolinks. The red is males. I'm sorry, the white is male and the red is female. And this is only a part of their migration. The reason I wanted to show you this one part is because bobolinks do something that is bazonkers insane. They fly 3 days over the open ocean from North America to South America nonstop. Okay, so they'll fly from Vermont to somewhere between the Delmarva Peninsula and Nova Scotia. And from that point, they just take off over the ocean and say, I'm out of here, and I hope that I get to Colombia or Venezuela. Some of them, about a quarter of them, make it all the way. So then about 3/4 of them stop on an island or 2 on the way. And this image shows you sort of where they're headed. It's just amazing behavior. Here is those same birds, those 17, and where they went to in South America. So just a totally dramatic migration that these animals, that we're stewarding in our fields every day, flying just amazing distances. We've had some birds that are flying in total 18,000 kilometers in a year. And this is a project that we've just published last week or 2 weeks ago, where we've taken these data from 6 different populations across North America, and you can see the black spots. And it's basically showing where the birds move to in the spring and in the fall. And the cool thing about this is that bobolinks across their distribution are all going effectively through the same channels coming to the East Coast. So this is, you can see, we tracked birds all the way from British Columbia, and they moved all the way across the continent and came down over the Gulf through the Florida area. So the next stage, and this is really exciting stuff with the Farm Hub. Last summer, I was able to pilot a slightly different tracking technology where they wear this device, and this device actually spoke live to satellites. For the other units that I showed you, we have to recapture the bird the next year and download the data. This data actually speaks directly to cell towers and then into the Argos network system. Sorry, not cell towers, to the Argos satellite system. And I want to show you just a little preview of what we learned from this. So this unit fell off the bird in early September. But what we found from it in those 3 months of tracking blew my mind, all right? So the middle part of it where the biggest dot is, that's where that bird was nesting. He had an active nest, and we knew everything about this bird. We knew where the field he hatched on, which was 1 field over. He came back and bred on the dot with the field with the big dot, and then these are some of his forays. He was flying every day to some distant field up to 3 miles away to copulate with other females and coming back while he was having a nest. Right, it's the American dream, huh? There you go. All right, I got 2 minutes, I'm moving fast. So we're taking this information, we're giving it to landowners, and we have this, I already said we do one stupid thing. This is our second stupid thing. We've created the equivalent of football cards, but for bobolinks and savanna sparrows, where we're telling the stories of these birds as a football card or a Pokemon card, whatever you like. And this is orange, yellow, metal, orange, and we show them dispersal maps, and we give them demographics of the bird, and we give these to people so they can hang them on the refrigerators and talk to their neighbors about the birds that we steward. This is one for bobolinks. It's the same idea. It's all about trying to communicate science with the people that are stewarding these animals. And the last and absolutely most important part of this is absolutely beer. And this is another way that we're trying to communicate the stories of these lives, where this brewery in Burlington, Vermont, Zero Gravity, is creating a beer called the Bobolink Saison, which is also available in the spring and summer, in the summer and fall in New York State. So should you choose to buy it, you should. And they're telling the story of our project through this beer. They're using rice from Argentina in the brewing process so that they're connecting the Vermont community with these birds where they're wintering. And I get proceeds from the sale of these beers, and I buy geolocators to track bobolinks to Argentina and Vermont. So another way to really talk about these things. So I'm totally out of time, but these are the rock stars of this project. The birds and these guys, these are my students over many years, chasing birds around and having fun stuff. And some really important colleagues, Alan Strong and two of my grad students. Emma White on the right is my current grad student. She's finishing up next month. And funders and amazing folks and baby Savannah sparrows because they're so cute. I have no time, but if I had time, I'd answer questions. Oh, I do? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks. So I'm a dairy farmer, and I have a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
I work at we rotationally graze, so I'm curious about what farming practices are on these dairy farms, because that varies widely. And the idea of May 31st as a cut date, sounds great, but it's changing for us every year, and it's so incredibly variable.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us that rotationally graze. I know it's been a little bit different. It's amazing how different it can be for us here in the Hudson Valley. And then last year was extremely wet for us, for example, but it was extremely dry for farmers I know up in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
But then this past season, we had a really big summer slump where, it affects, obviously the season previous affects when we're gonna cut next year because how much we were able to rest our grass. And so I'm curious, about that. And then also if you have any connection with Sarah Flack or any of the agronomists through University of Vermont that are working with grass-fed dairies, because hopefully that is the direction we're all moving in with dairying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me first about pastures. So I've studied lots of rotationally grazed pastures as part of this. As far as reproductive success, they're sort of in the middle. A lot of the nests get trampled on or eaten by the cows. And we've created a program that's exactly like this early mowing thing for rotationally grazed pastures.
Okay.
And they're funding it through Vermont NRCS, and I have a paper that I could send you as well, a PDF of the paper that describes that program. It's a shorter window between grazing.
Right.
It's not as long as 65 days.
Yeah.
But I can share that with you.
Okay.
The trick of that is that the word rotation, or words, rotational grazing is the most abstract words ever because everybody does it a little bit differently, right? And so it's very hard, based on your farmscape, it's very hard to carbon copy that management style across units.
Yeah.
Related to that, and this is really important, the dates that I have established for Vermont are not the dates for here. They're not the dates. You cannot translate. It's a different latitude. They're not grossly different, but they're definitely going to be a few days different. And so I would never want any state to adopt those dates uniformly.
Even the dates, there's no norm. What I'm trying to say is, even if you had a date for New York, even just imagining May 31st for Vermont, that changes. If you're truly monitoring the nutrient quality of your forage for your animal, it's going to change yearly. It's not going to be the same every year. There's no possible way.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just looking at it for the bird's perspective, but I'm just thinking as a farmer, that just varies so much.
The NRCS contract is a 3-year contract, and you get a 1-year mulligan in that, where you don't have to, if you can't mow by it's actually not even mowing by the 31st. It's being done with all operations, including spreading manure, by the 31st. And so there is it's sort of a built-in, it's been really rainy and we can't get out here and mow. There's sort of a safety valve for that. But I totally understand what you're saying, and much of that is, again, like the farm by farm variation.
Yeah, so I guess maybe it's this paper you're talking about, but I'm wondering, like, since we're constantly having to essentially think on our feet when it comes to our grazing systems and our haying systems, are there tools that we can think of that we can apply our own, like, instant kind of interpretation of to help the birds, you know what I mean, without just this kind of like formula that can't change?
Yeah, so this is a little bit tangential to that, but if I understand your question, so these birds avoid using the edges of fields, hayfields or pastures. They never nest within 50 meters of the edge at all.
Or hedgerow?
Or hedgerow. Right. Yeah, hedgerow is definitely an edge for them. And bobolinks almost never nest within 100 meters of a field edge. And so when you're thinking about your variation in year to year and you need to make different management decisions, if you could really benefit the birds if you made those management decisions based on those outer edges of the field, okay, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that would be my first thing to suggest. And then the smaller scale stuff is sort of a farm by farm situation that we can talk about. Do
you consult for individual farms? Do you have?
I mean, I'm happy to
resources?
talk to anybody. Yeah, but I'm not a consultant, right?
Yeah. Cool.
But I'm always helpful. No, I'm not actually helpful. I'm always happy to try to help. Sorry.
I think we have time for one more question. Bobolinks here are single brooded, but in the Hudson Valley, Savannah is double brooded. I'm just wondering if any of your research looked into the effects of Hayfield Management on the second brood.
Yeah, so actually they'll nest up to 6 times in our fields. We've had Savannah sparrows keep failing from mowing, and then in between mowings get eaten by predators. And so they've nested up to 6 times, and birds that nest up to 6 times are never successful. And so that's why Savannah sparrow populations are more stable than bobolinks, because they keep trying, and have more success from that, where they'll fledge a few more offspring per year. And that makes all the difference. If bobolinks would do that, they would be doing a whole lot better. But they're constrained by that longer migration, and so they can't do that. Only a tiny fraction of bobolinks that have built a nest with laid eggs in it will re-nest in the same season. And I've got a lot of data on that. So does that answer your question at all? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, that was really interesting. Do you think the high rates of fidelity for your fields are because they're being better managed than the other fields in the surrounding 3,000, the larger area you were sampling?
I'm certain it's not, actually, for 2 reasons. One, we started seeing this fidelity in the first year of the study, where they're coming back in year 2, and the field management was the worst it could have possibly been for them. And the second reason is that in these larger searches, when we're out and we find some nests, we'll ban some chicks, and we could be like 10 kilometers away and we'll ban some chicks. We're finding those chicks coming back locally, and we've had no influence on the management of those fields at all. So no, it's not a function of our. I wish I could say that'd be awesome, but they're just crazy birds. Yeah. Thank you.